Awesome. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you. Welcome to this breakout session. I'm Shelby Alavecchios. I'll be facilitating for you this morning. I'm going to give everybody a minute to come into the room. And just know that we will be utilizing the chat for the most part during this session. Couple more minutes to get everyone in the room. Hope everybody's enjoying the breakout sessions and the programming we have for you today. Okay, it looks like we are pretty good. Good morning, good morning. I'm Shelby Alavecchios. I'm part of the career navigation team here at ACMF. This breakout session I will be facilitating, and we have Nicki Bartram, and she'll be talking with us today about parenting in a pandemic. Nicki, go ahead and take it away.
All right, well, thank you all. Good morning. Shelby, can you hear me okay? Let's do a quick mic check.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, perfect. All right, well, good morning, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So like Shelby said, my name is Nicki Bartram, and first and foremost, I'm a licensed professional counselor. Currently, I work in several different capacities, including as a consultant for the Be Connected program under ACMF. And then I'm also a private practice therapist and spend a lot of my hours working with families and children and couples and so on and so forth. So I have worked with military families for most of my career as a therapist. I was the mental health director over at the Army National Guard for a little while. Like I said, I do see a lot of military families in my practice. And then back in the day, I worked in the juvenile justice system and in adolescent psychiatric inpatient facilities. So a little bit about me. I'm a mom also of two teenage girls. Let's see, 13 going on 40 and 16 going on 60. I'm sure you guys have got teenage daughters out there, so you know what I mean. I also have two St. Bernards that I call my other children. And then I'm also a military spouse to a U.S. Air Force veteran. All right, so Shelby, next slide, please.
All right, I'm going to bring it up for everybody. And Nicki, just do a little thumbs up when you can see my screen.
Perfect. I love that teddy bear. So let's go to the next slide, to the agenda slide.
Sounds good.
All right, good deal. So let's get started. Today we're going to take a look at parenting in the pandemic, a basic overview of how the pandemic has affected the family unit. So we're going to look at some of our parenting styles and how our expectations have shifted in this pandemic as parents for not only ourselves, but also for our children. And then we're going to move to a discussion on how we can reclaim some of our parenting skills, you know, as this pandemic still is continuing, but as we're kind of sloping down the other side of where we were perhaps this time last year. All right, so we're going to start with a poll. So Shelby, next slide, and we'll see if this works. We're hopeful that it'll work. So the poll question is, how has the pandemic affected your stress levels as a parent? So if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and pick the button. And let's see what we've got here. Give it just a couple minutes. And as we go through this, there's no right or wrong answer. Just taking a pulse of where we are as a group. And Shelby, do you think everyone's answered?
We have about 65% that have voted right now.
Okay. I just have to say that the person that's in category number 1, I am better than I used to be. You're my hero. And then the 3 folks that are still doing well, no changes for me. You're also my heroes.
We're at 74%. Do you want me to go ahead and end the poll and share the results?
Yeah,
okay,
let's go ahead and do that.
Ending the poll now, and here come the results. Everybody can see them now.
Perfect. So I'll recap then. So the 1 and the 3 of you in the audience that are better than you used to be and still doing well, you're my heroes. For everybody else, you are kind of where where I'm at, definitely, and certainly where it's expected and very common, and where most mental health professionals are seeing families right now is in that C and D. So feeling greater stress, experiencing some burnout. The majority of the answer there was I'm experiencing some burnout, and that is pretty normal, common theme across the world for all of us as parents. Alrighty, I'm gonna end that poll and go to the next slide. All right, so why have our stress levels increased? Well, COVID-19 pandemic has really uniquely affected children and families in so many different ways, but primarily by disrupting our routines and really changing our relationships that we have within the role of the family. So if you think about the traditional family, you know, parents went to work or parents stayed at home to help with the child care, and the kids had, you know, school activities, recreational activities, friends. We really had a lot of stuff going on as families. But the pandemic came along and really affected the way that everyone kind of interacted with themselves as a family and with the rest of the world. So what we're seeing as mental health providers and anecdotally as parents is just that absence of that normal school and childcare routine, and even, you know, extracurricular activities, family gatherings. Sometimes, you know, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents were a big part of helping us to raise our children. Has really just gone. You know, this time last year it had ended, and we're seeing, you know, certain families making choices currently to try and bring those back. But for the longest time, our children's support and our support as parents, social and emotional support networks have really just been really broadly disrupted. So as a result, we're seeing parents that are stressed out, and compounded by our, you know, traditional responsibilities of going to work. We're also having to face new roles as educators. I like to say playmates, because even though my kids are older, there was still a lot of demand from them to kind of be their entertainment, full-time caregiving, and then with our own stress of trying to work and maybe some financial and social situations, being worried about our own families and our own parents, it's just caused so much burnout for parents and caregivers. And as a therapist in my private practice, and along with the other 12 folks that are seeing patients, we can attest to this. We've had a lot of increase in parents coming in who are just really stressed out, burned out, and a little less optimistic too about their child's future. And I even have a couple of parents who said, you know, I don't like my children right now. I like them a little less. And again, that's normal, and that's kind of where we're at. All right, next slide, and then we're gonna pause after the slide and take a look at some of the comments. So one of the big causes of stress amongst parents has been the concept of having some lowered expectations. So as you think through this, I invite you to type some responses in the chat box as well. Have you lowered your expectations as a parent and for your children? So again, I can tell you from my work and a lot of our, you know, the professionals that we interact with, we are seeing many parents who are lowering their expectations around their children in terms of lots of different things. So some of the stuff on the screen, so how your child spends their free time. I know for myself, there were things that I just absolutely would never have let my children do in the past, but now I'm kind of like, well, you know, they're stuck here in this house all the time. Maybe it would be okay. You know, and kind of vice versa. There were things that maybe they did in the past, and now I'm like, nope, absolutely not, just not doing it. We're also seeing some lowered expectations for us as parents with our child's academics and their grades. So I have a ton of kids in my private practice that were A's and B's, and now they're, you know, kind of barely scraping by with C's and D's. And, you know, a lot of parents, as parents, we've just kind of had to accept that, because children don't learn well in these kind of environments that we're in today. Children really need to be in an environment where they can have that tactile, kind of hands-on, face-to-face, you know, learning experience with their peers and their teachers. And so we've seen a real struggle for kids to kind of maintain their grades. And those kiddos that have, you know, we're seeing a lot more stress coming from them. Behavior too, we've had a lot of disruption in behavior from our kiddos, and things that weren't okay in the past are now okay, and so on and so forth. I've had a lot of parents and children also worry about the regression in their child's social and emotional development. And so, you know, kids have found it difficult to interact not only with each other, and there's a lot of stress when they are trying to interact with their peers, but also interacting with adults and others in society. So, you know, just going into the store now, you're seeing a lot of children really reluctant to engage in that way with, you know, a clerk or paying for something, or kind of hiding behind parents because people are, you know, very scared and of being too close to each other. And it caused a lot of problems with that social and emotional piece. And then some parents have lost or struggled with their positive parenting techniques. We'll talk a little bit about that later on today. And as we've stated, parents have their own stress management, and we've certainly seen that take a tumble in the wrong direction for some of our parents. All right, I'm going to pause for a minute. Shelby, any comments coming in that need some answers?
Yeah, definitely. We had one question that came in asking if there were any resources for free tutoring for kids.
That is a great question, and hopefully you guys were in the general session and had the number to the Be Connected support line. I know that they've had some stuff coming in, some programs that are available. So Shelby, I don't have I know it's an 866 number, so if you wouldn't mind dropping the support line number in the chat, that would be great. The problem with some of these resources, though, for tutoring has been that they're still being done via this virtual setup. So my recommendation would really be to see what's going on with the schools and the school district, and if any if any teachers are offering, you know, after hours via Zoom or something like that. That's kind of what I've seen the schools do. And I know certainly they're definitely talking about having some summer, most districts are looking at some summer schools that are not going to be paid for. So right now, I think if your child has to do summer school, you have to pay for the classes, but some districts are talking about, just because of the regression in academics, to offer those kids that are kind of falling behind a little bit some free time to catch up. So definitely check in with your school districts. Good question. Okay. So let me see, we're at slide 6. Okay, let's go to slide 6, which is poll number 2. And so as it's being pulled up, I will just talk through the question. So are you worried about your child's social and emotional health since the pandemic began? I'll just take a minute. And Shelby, let me know when we're done.
We're at about 70% now, so let's give it 15 more seconds.
Okay. I really like this poll feature that we've implemented here.
And almost everybody has put in, we're at about 85%. So I'm going to go ahead and share that in just a moment.
Okay. All right, so can everyone see the results? Maybe.
Yeah, they can all see it right now. Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we've got about half, a little over half, are somewhat worried about social and emotional development. Some have, some are worried and seen changes, and then someone has already sought help for their child's mental health. So good. All right, I'm going to shut that poll down for me. So I think the point I want to make here is that for those of you that are somewhat worried and then kind of on down in that category, you know, what I've noticed is that some parents have kind of forgotten to what is normal, because there's not that interaction necessarily taking place with friends and neighbors and family and school and other parents to kind of get that baseline on what is a normal, quote unquote, normal, you know, way for your child to be exhibiting certain behaviors. So talk to other parents if you can, talk to the school. They're always a good resource if you're concerned. The CDC website has some really great articles on how to parent how to parent in COVID-19 for children and teens. And so if you go to that, if you just go to, CDC and type in COVID-19 children and teens in the search bar there, it'll pull up a lot of things. They also give some input on how to have your children be socially active in the pandemic. And of course, you can always seek professional opinions from your child's pediatrician. And if you feel like mental health consultation is needed, then you can look at your health insurance, call Be Connected for some resources, and or look at recommendations from your child's pediatrician. All right, so we're gonna go to the next slide, Shelby, which is how do we reclaim parenting in our pandemic? So please free to put any type of suggestions in the box, especially ones that don't include giving your child away. As I had a parent tell me the other day, I had to laugh. So if you have any ideas as to how you've been coping, we'd love to hear from them. All right, next slide. Okay, so first and foremost, this has been a super scary time for everybody, especially for our kiddos. If you've got little ones, even up to teenagers, they're not really sure what's going on. I know we've been scared as adults, and so just remember that our children have even less capacity to understand complex, things that are going on in the world. And so the best recommendation I can give as a therapist and a mom is really just to talk with your children and answer questions about the pandemic very simply and honestly. Talk to them about any frightening news they hear. It's okay to say that people are sick and getting sick because of a virus, but then really kind of move into safety tips for them so that they don't kind of focus on that piece about getting sick. So they can focus on, okay, well, hand washing, wearing our masks, staying home. We'll do more things, just really focus on the things that you can do to keep your family healthy. Secondly, recognize your child's feelings. So calmly and simply say, I can see that you're upset, for whatever reason. And in our home, it's been because, you can't have a sleepover with your friends right now, or your friends are, posting things on social media that gives us as parents reason to pause about, are they sick and practicing, good hygiene practices, and would we want them in our home when we have, other family members that might be vulnerable medically. So just really help, especially those older children and teens, kind of work through some of those issues about disappointment. This is a good time to teach those kinds of skills in the pandemic, that reality-based disappointment. How can we practice healthy optimism, and what else can we do? What other ways can we have fun with our friends and our family? Staying in touch with loved ones, keeping connected. Children may worry, especially younger kiddos, about a grandparent or other relatives who are living alone in maybe another state. So again, if you can, have good physically distanced visits. People are getting vaccinated more and more. You can talk with your kiddos about that. But then if you can't, then make sure, we use these kind of mediums, the Zoom and the chat and the this and that. I'm sorry, I'm not the best with social media, as Shelby will attest to. But there are ways to be able to stay connected that way. And then be a good role model on how to manage your feelings, even though as parents, I know a lot of us are really struggling. But talk through how you're managing your own feelings as a parent. I'm frustrated too. I'm frustrated that I can't go out and do these things with you and with my friends and the activities that I used to do. Again, really kind of, we can use this as a different way to teach some different skills, especially skills about hardship and not getting the things that we want when we want them sometimes. And then my favorite, look forward and offer extra hugs to your kiddos. This is not going to be forever. Scientists are working hard to figure out how people get sick and how to keep them safe, and things will get better. Okay, next slide. So staying informed is important, but too much information can be very overwhelming. And so I know for me and my husband, we have multiple news feeds on our phones, and they're popping up all the time. So lots of kids have cell phones, or they have access to phones, they have emails, social media accounts. Just be real mindful of those and the information that your kids are getting in those mediums. It can be very overwhelming, especially to a young brain. And for our younger kids, if they don't understand what they're seeing, then they can formulate opinions and viewpoints that are not accurate. So instead, manage media consumption. Talk to your children about, the pandemic in a supportive, really very developmentally appropriate ways. Keep it simple, keep it clear, validate worry and concern, but then really remind them that you're there for them. And whatever values you have as a family, make sure that they are aware of those values. And if there's information coming in that's opposing those values, work together to identify, how you're going to explain that to your children versus what they may be hearing or seeing. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so next, as we've talked about a little bit already, the pandemic has just really done away with the traditional routine. So it's really important, more so than ever now, to try and get back to maintaining those healthy routines. They really, for children, create a sense of order to the day. We have routines at home, we have routines at school. It really prepares children for expectations for themselves, and then also prepares us as mini humans for what we can expect as we get older and into the workforce. So it offers a lot of reassurances. And so in some uncertain times like we've been having, the best thing we can do is kind of go back and recreate some of those routines in non-traditional ways if need be. So all children, including teens, no matter what they tell you, benefit from routines that are predictable, but kind of maybe flexible enough to meet some individual needs. So some examples here are wake-up routines, lunch, chores, exercise, that kind of lunch routine if your child is still at home, in an online learning environment, and then family time, bedtime, family time and reading before bed. So what are you guys doing in the evenings, kind of from that, 5 to 6 or 7, when maybe there used to be extracurricular and sporting activities for your children and play dates and stuff like that. Maybe that's not there. How do you create new things? And then, of course, bedtime routines for the younger kiddos. So I'm interested, for folks that are in the audience, what have some of you guys done to maintain some healthy routines? I think that'd be great to share with others. So if you wouldn't mind, pop some things in the chat room and we'll come back and take a look at that. All right, next slide. So I also want to just bring up the different personalities, make sure that we're calling this out. So, staying home all day can reinforce anxiety for anxious and introverted children, and can leave those children that are a little more extroverted feeling very lonely. So all of our kids have different personalities, and we as parents have different personalities. So really the best way to try and engage and support differing personalities is not to paint, all your children with one brush and have kind of one style of parenting for everyone. So for example, if you have a more introverted child, really try to help balance their time so that they're not just doing one solo activity all day, that they have some time and opportunity to connect with family and peers if the peers are safe and healthy. And then really helping those extroverted kids find creative ways, to get out there again with friends who may be healthy and safe, or even using technology to stay connected with their friends and family. So I know when this started out, we had a lot of Zoom dance parties in our house with our teens, and my oldest teen found this cooking show that was being hosted by somebody. I can't remember, but there were a lot of different exercise and yoga and workout people that came online. And so really there's just so many, if people are looking to connect in different ways like that, that would be a really good thing to encourage. Really, I think the bottom line is just strive for a mix of screen time. If you can, socially connect with folks that are healthy and safe and you feel comfortable as parents, that's good. As much physical activity, going outdoors and fun projects, really good ways to kind of keep the different personalities of your kiddos engaged and entertained. Okay, let's go to our next slide. So see, my screen went blank, so we're on the positive discipline screen. Yep. All right, so use of positive discipline is really another great tool with everyone home together 24/7. Is children can still feel a little lost and alone, even though everybody's physically at home. Little younger kids too can become, very aware that physically everybody may be home, but emotionally and socially we're not all connected to them because we're doing our things. We're working. We're in our offices with the door shut. The teens of the door shut. So really set aside some special time with each child if you can. Again, we've talked about cooking and reading and playing a favorite game, but choose some time to spend with each child at least once a day, whether it's 10, 20 minutes. Giving them their undivided attention can really help them feel more connected. And so using that positive discipline, again, structure the day can really help redirect poor behavior. Sometimes kiddos will misbehave because they're bored, they don't know any better, or they're just trying to get any attention. And sometimes negative attention is better than any, negative attention is better than, what am I trying to say? I don't know what I'm trying to say. They'll do things to get attention because any attention is better than negative attention. That's what I'm trying to say. Again, help them engage in creative play, building forts, collages. I went to our neighbors when this started and told them on either side that the kids were going to be drawing and painting the sidewalk, and we would clean it up. And no one had any problem with that. And we had parties in our driveways, in our homes, and invited all the neighbors. And so really just creative new ways to connect with people. Again, directing their attention on focused activities is really good and really helpful. Using rewards and privileges, and know when not to respond, right? So we talked just a minute ago about children will, sometimes engage in negative behaviors to get your attention. Setting good boundaries and letting them know that that behavior won't garner your attention is also something that's really helpful for positive discipline. And then some timeouts for your younger children. And what we say as mental health professionals is usually 1 minute per age of child is a good guide. So a lot of times I'll have parents come in and say, we had our 5-year-old in timeout for 30 minutes. And after a certain period, the 5-year-old really doesn't have a concept of time like we do as older adults. So, 5 minutes is really enough for them to understand and break the behavior cycle that we're seeing. If anyone has any other suggestions about positive parenting, please put that in the chat room. And I'm going to pause here for a minute, Shelby. I see some great stuff coming in here from Pam about Valleywise Family Learning Center. So that looks like a good, I'm going to have to check that out too, Pam. Anything else that you see, Shelby, in here?
We did have a really interesting point brought up a little bit earlier that all relationships right now are strained because of this pandemic. And so if you could offer any advice for people that are, solo parenting, maybe they're going through a divorce or a separation, some positive suggestions for people who are now dealing with someone that's no longer their spouse.
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, a very big question. So I would just say, it's so hard, right? It's hard anyway under the normal circumstances to co-parent when these things are taking place. So I think, setting some good boundaries and having the discussion with the other parent about what's acceptable in your home, what might be acceptable in our home, and then really, trying to facilitate an agreement so that the children are not confused. I see a lot of parents that will sometimes try to have one set of rules for their kids, even though there's 2 different houses. And that may work for a minute, but if there's other parents or other siblings in these other houses, then it can get very confusing. So as a therapist, sometimes the best way forward for families are to really just help educate the child. So when you're in, mom's house with her family, these are kind of the expectations. And then make sure that child really understands when you shift back to dad's house with dad's family or what's going on with dad, these are the expectations. So that's really how we would do that as a therapist. Always, if you're struggling with those co-parenting and need guidance, therapy is a good way to do that. Co-parenting, some counselors do co-parenting therapy. What we don't want to do is make the child feel confused and stressed out as well about what is the expectation, what do I do, where do I go. So if the parents can work together, that's great, but sometimes that's just not possible, and it's not even the parents, it's the other situations that they find themselves in. So hopefully that answered your question a little bit, and we'd happy to talk more offline if that's a situation that you might need some extra tips for. All right, so next slide, and maybe this might help too a little bit. So mood boosting tips for all. So another key component to reclaiming your parenting skills is really trying to help your child relax and boost their mood in ways, some other ways. We've already discussed some of these, but really want to help your child relax and just kind of de-stress themselves. And so obviously some basic things here, like a good night's sleep, a routine there again, bath, shower, music. For the younger kiddos, maybe a hand rub, foot rub, back rub in a cool, dark room, and really promote using the bed for just sleeping, not for homework, TV. Try to have separate areas for your kiddos so that they can get some good sleep. Eating well, of course, protein-rich foods for breakfast and lunch. Try to reduce the sugar. All basic things that as parents we all struggle with. Especially trying to get to the grocery store or having groceries delivered. That can be an expense, but as best you can and what you can find, really try to have a good, healthy diet for your kiddos and for yourself. And so what we did in our home is we did a lot of cooking together with the kids. So I really didn't have any other activities. Swimming and horse riding and all this stuff was canceled. So we started cooking, which I hate cooking, just for anyone who knows me. Detest it, and I still do, but it's been an activity that we can do, and then the kids have learned something about food. Offer gratitude, so really focus on the positive. So what do you feel positive and grateful about? There's tons of research out there that shows that expressing gratitude helps boost overall happiness and really leads to lower rates of stress. So I'll give you an example with my kids. When the pandemic started, it was just, we can't go out, we can't do this, we can't see our friends, we can't go to school, we can't go horse riding. It was all this can't. And all around us, we were seeing the country fall apart, people getting sick, businesses shuttering up, people losing their jobs. Even some of our neighbors, they couldn't go to work and they did lose their jobs. And so really focusing back to your children about, hey, we're healthy, I'm still working, your dad's still working. We've got a house, we've got a roof over our head, we're okay. And just really kind of pointing out even the most basic things that can seem obviously positive in times like this are really good for for helping to mood boost. Exercise, and then if you can, volunteering, lending a hand. It could be simply just, calling a neighbor, walking the neighbor's dog for them if they're elderly. I think some things have kind of opened up a little bit for volunteering activities, but as much as you can, figure out ways to give back to communities. And of course, for, this is a military symposium. We've got a lot of troops that are still deployed or deploying. And there are a lot of organizations out there that are still making care packages and care baskets. And so our support line has a list of all of that stuff. Then, you can call in and talk about how can we help and what can we do. There's this really, if there's any crocheters out there or knitters, there's a great organization, the Linus Project, where they are literally crocheting blankets for babies over at Phoenix Children's Hospital. And for moms that are stuck in the NICU with their kiddos, and it's really just one parent in there at any given time, and sometimes no parents, and so that's a really good thing there. So there's lots of examples of stuff like that where we kind of think of volunteering as we physically have to be present, but there's a lot of different things that we can do. And again, manage screen time and talk a lot about meditation, yoga. There's a lot of information online about these things, and I wish we had more time here to go over some of this stuff too. Next slide. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I do want to have some discussion. We've got about 10 minutes left. But for many families, school is back or in a hybrid model or will be soon. And so we've had a taste of what it's like to be teacher. And And for me, I know I have a whole lot more respect for the wonderful work that our teachers do. So how do we make it a smooth transition back to the more kind of normal school routine? And so good communication with the school, and just some basic things here. If you notice some things while your child has been at home, make sure you're giving that back to the school. Routine builder here, it says that what I mean by that is teachers really require the help of parents if you're still in this online modality, to make sure their children are participating and constantly participating in that remote session. So you'll see some kids that are on, but they have to stay with their cameras on, and so it's really difficult for the teachers to keep that going, and managing kids that are in the classroom and kids that are online. It's been a real challenge, and I've noticed that from seeing my kids who have been half day or half week in person and the other half online, and it's very confusing. So I think whatever we can do to be good vigilant guardians, and making sure our kids are doing what they need to do, and because they're online so much more, just really being asking about cyberbullying and sexting, and all these other forms of harassment that come with social media, and we've just seen kind of blossom over the pandemic as our older teens, especially younger and older teens, are using social media more and more. And then if possible, if you're able to communicate openly with your child's teacher about where they're struggling, that's key, I think, in my opinion, to help kiddos transition back to school and be successful. All right, last slide, and then we'll go to some of these questions. So how about us, right? I wanted to make sure that I took some time to address the parental mental health challenges that we saw in the beginning of the poll, the first poll we put up there, that we're all kind of struggling. Again, type in the chat if you have any things that you've been doing to kind of manage your own mental health that doesn't involve food and alcohol. It's interestingly I say that because I saw this article the other day that the sales of alcohol have increased tenfold while everyone else is struggling. The alcohol industry is booming. So really, I can't stress enough, just take care of yourselves. Caregivers, as caregivers for so many different things, sometimes ourselves, our families, our jobs, our children, even elderly parents, we forget to eat healthy, exercise, get enough sleep, all the stuff that we've talked about for your children. We don't do it for ourselves. We don't take a break. We don't decompress. And if there is more than one parent at home, take turns kind of watching the children. If you're in a single parent house, really figure out if there's someone else that can help you, if there are friends, if there's a community that you can join to help with some of those co-parenting issues. Just really maintaining our own physical and mental health. So, stay connected to your friends if you can. And we've talked about investing in relationships for our children earlier, about making sure that they stay connected to their families and their friends, but we need to as well. I have a lot of parents that come into my office and they're so focused on their kids and how can they get their kids going to where they need to be. And even normally as parents, we often forget to take care of ourselves, and our lives divert into, the kids go to school, the kids come home, they have homework, then they have extracurricular, and then when they're older, you're driving them places and until they can learn how to drive, and then when they can drive, then you're worrying about them driving, and it's just a lot to be a parent in this day and age. And then add the pandemic on top of that. A lot of us have just stopped. We've stopped taking care of ourselves completely. We're not interacting with our friends and families in ways that we could. So really think about how we can invest in some relationships. And then if all of that fails, there is a school of thought. Mindfulness really does a lot of good work, in terms of meditation and yoga, and just again really focus on being present in the moment, and focusing on that gratitude, such as simple things like a cup of coffee, or the flowers that are blooming, daffodils, the sunset. Just really take as much time as you can to focus on yourself as you're caring for everybody else. All right, so last slide is questions. We've got 5 minutes. I'm sorry. I know you guys wanted, Shelby told me I had to stop and give everyone 10 minutes, but I'm a talker. So what else have you seen, Shelby, that might be interesting to bring up?
Well, first, let me apologize because my kids are home and my one little baby has an ear infection. You can probably hear him screaming through my screen. So
I love
boy,
it.
it's been a hard year. I'm so glad to be here with all of you guys that can kind of share those pressures and those hardships. I think overall what I'm seeing in the chat right now is people sharing how they're taking care of themselves, which is something I struggle to do every day. A lot of people get out and go for walks or just get out in nature, which is perfect and wonderful. Besides that, I don't see any other questions in the chat right now, just people sharing how they're keeping it together. I got to take it from your guys' book.
I know. Yeah. So I see a lot of good stuff here. Motivational work. So yoga, meditation, staying hydrated. Who I saw that a minute ago. That's a great one. I'm just remembering to eat and drink. I've been sitting at my desk since 8 a.m. and I don't know, I got my water here, but it's still full, just some basic stuff that we just forget to do. Yeah, and so I saw a comment somewhere in here about children getting sick a lot as they're bouncing back and forth from school to daycare, and that's a really good point. I think maybe it was Ashley. I can't remember.
I think it was me, but if anybody else shares that.
Well, I know that was a decision that I made the beginning of the year because my children did have the opportunity to go back to school in January, and within a week they were sick, and it wasn't COVID, but it was other stuff. And because they had all been out of the, mixing with other people and building up that natural immunity, they were suddenly just sick with everything. And so even with the masks, it was. So we made the decision again, Dad and I, to keep them online for a little longer. And again, these are things that we never thought we would have to make decisions about. Balancing. Do we physically, because one of them physically has some physical health issues. How do we balance the physical health issues with that social emotional development that we talked about earlier? Which one takes precedence? Where are you willing to give? Which as parents, none of us we want the best for our children, but just some of these like bizarre decisions that we've had to make. And I think even, not to get political, but even, now we saw our governor lift the mask mandate for schools and leave it to the schools to make those decisions. And there's been a ton of comments and reaction to the parents in our school district. And, there's just so many decisions that we have to make right now that I anticipate continuing for a little while longer. So as you're going through all of this, just making sure you're reaching out to your resources, to your peers, your friends, your family, to the schools. I think if anything, I just want everyone on this call to know that, you're not alone. There are folks that can help you through some of these questions, even if it's just, hey, I just need to bounce this idea off some of you. Our support line, there's a lot of parents on our support line too. And if you haven't had a moment, just kind of go through the chat here. There's some really great resources that were given out here. And just take a moment to look through these. I'm especially interested in that one that, I can't remember who put it on there, but I'm going to look through these because there's some of these I'm going to take from my own patients. Who are struggling with some of these things. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box. I appreciate you letting me be here today and talk through parenting in the pandemic. And Shelby, thank you for helping facilitate this with me.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you, Nikki. We are going to end the meeting here for everybody. So if you could make your way back to the conference center and the agenda, we will see you all in another breakout session. Have a great day, everyone.